am one of the lead mentors for Waffles. Brennan, my lovely co-host, is also the other lead mentor for Waffles. Today, we have a new talk, never been done before, very exciting. You're all here to see it, about navigating match planning discussions. So because the two of us are both like in the strat world when it comes to events, my role is like being the strategy, like discussion talker, like implementing of the plans. He's been the drive coach for 7 years. And helps make match plans, helps do drive review and such. This is kind of our wheelhouse. And one of the biggest things that we notice is that match playing discussions is like the art of match planning. So we're here to give some of our most common talking points, our opinions on the things to help all teams get better at planning their matches. You've already met him if you were here before. That's Brennan.
Hi, I'm a lead mentor for FRC. For Waffles, been here since the start in 2013, and then was a student on another local team in Kingston starting in 2009. So been doing it for a few years.
And then my FRC journey started in 2013 when I joined 771 as a student. I left the school, took a little bit of a break from FRC, went to Queens for my undergrad in materials engineering, where I joined Waffles and then stayed with Waffles throughout my grad school pursuits, and then kind of fell into the strategy in like my second, third year on the team as I was kind of looking for my niche, coming from like a more awards background into something that I could do at events.
Okay, so we'll start off just talking about what makes a successful match for us, because this kind of frames the entire discussions that we have heading into a match. You can make that slightly bigger. So
yeah.
Cool. So there's kind of two parts. We want to have a good outcome, and we also want to have a good match experience with the other teams. And without both of those, generally we consider the match not successful. So match outcome is like the robot performs well. We're kind of getting the expected ranking points that we want from that match. Winning is not necessarily required. So many matches are not super winnable, and we kind of just go for the maximum we can get out of that match. And we generally want to do as well as we expect, or better. Obviously, it's never a bad thing. In terms of the match experience, this is the thing that I think is a little bit harder to tackle. We want to make sure that everyone in the match feels listened to. We don't want teams to come away and feel like, man, I really couldn't advocate for what my team wanted. And we want them to have a positive view of kind of like us after we have that discussion and go through that whole match process. We don't ever want to have a team come away and be like, Waffles, really didn't enjoy working with them. They're, pushing us to do something that we really didn't want to do or whatever. We want to be helping them have a good time. We want to make sure everybody's on the same page. One of the big things that happens or has happened in the past is like we go into match and teams are just kind of like one team thinks we're doing one thing, we think we're doing something else, and everything goes to hell when we get on the field because nobody's kind of on the same page. The other thing is we really don't want one team's desire to kind of dictate the whole match. So sometimes some teams will really have a super strong preference that will negatively impact all the other teams on the alliance, and we try and avoid those situations. We want teams to walk away to have a positive experience with us, not be frustrated, and just leave a good impression of how we kind of handled ourselves throughout the match.
Yeah. So you can have one or the other, but if you don't have both, like maybe you win, maybe you get the RP you expect, but if everyone's miserable, what's really the point of doing that? So looking now at actually planning a match and talking to your alliance partners about it, before you even start talking to them, for us, what I would recommend is your first step is do your due diligence and look at your scouting data before the match. So, I mean, I literally wrote it as due diligence. Get to know your partners and your opponents. One of the biggest things that to me indicates that you are, or at least helps with the confidence in like looking at your theoretical match plan and knowing what you're doing, is like going up to a team and saying like, I see you and I know to some, you don't literally say that, but like if you know what your partners can do, it helps build that alliance like camaraderie, as opposed to going in and being like, hello, Brennan, I'm 4476. I've never bothered to look at your robot. I don't know what you can do. I've never seen it. Tell me about you. It kind of helps establish some sort of like general good energy
Yeah.
in the alliance.
I was just gonna say, like, if you notice like a team had like a really good match or whatever, I find like it's kind of nice to be like, hey, I saw your last match. You look really good. Like, I noticed you scored like 10 game pieces. Sick, good job. Like having that kind of relationship right off the bat, where you can show that you're more than just like a transactional partner with your partners, is good, I think.
Yeah. And it's also good to have this knowledge as well. On the other hand, of like, if I go up to a team knowing, like, say I know that this team can't do L4s in auto, and I know that they've been, maybe they've been trying real hard, good for them, but they're like, yeah, I'm going to have an L4 auto. It's going to score 7 game pieces immediately. It's going to work perfectly. It's worked perfectly all event long. You don't say like, I don't believe you, but at least and you have that context to feel confident in yourself in what you're proposing, even if it might be against a direct perception of what someone has of themselves. And then you can also like, the better you can estimate, the better you can plan. This web page is our summary page. I grabbed it from a random match, but you can go in like knowing, okay, this is going to be a tough match. Okay, this should be an easy match. We can focus on RP. Or, oh, this is going to be a tough match. Let's consolidate our losses and get what we can. All of these things just give you that confidence to go into a match and not feel bamboozled or caught off guard.
Yeah, just to add before you switch to the next thing, like it helps to know what your partners are capable of doing, and when they're what they say versus what they actually have shown previously. You can see if there's a big difference in that. You can kind of you can evaluate how much you trust what they're saying in terms of their performance based on how well that matches up with your data, assuming you have good data.
And you see the last 2 hours or last hour. The other thing too is typically teams will overestimate their own abilities as opposed to being humble about them. Not that that's a bad thing. I like to think that we are going to do our best in every match, but there does need to be some sort of realism to it that the numbers provide, that like talking to your partners and taking them at their word might not. That's also one of the reasons why pit scouting is always a bit of a like, do we trust it for numbers issue, and why we don't do it. Because like, especially week 1, like, how are you going to realistically know how many cycles you can do in a match, right? You've never done a real match under real conditions with your robot in its current state. So why would you, like, that's just, pit scouting cycles is like picking numbers out of a hat, in my opinion, at least. Am I good to?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in terms of match philosophy, we really are trying to create the best outcome in terms of performance. And what we believe that is like making sure that we're all on the same page and agree on a strategy, even if the strategy isn't what we personally believe is the most optimal or best strategy. I would rather play a strategy that we know everybody's on board and we're going to execute to the best of our abilities than me getting really upset because we're not playing this really niche, weird thing that is technically better in the optimal conditions, but people don't really understand it or people don't play it as well.
Especially if they're not comfortable with it too. Like, you may have this niche plan that you think is great, and a team might just not be comfortable doing it, don't think they can execute on it, and pushing them into that like uncomfortable position is just going to make things worse and double down even more so.
We try and be as big team players as possible when we're approaching match strategy, just because we might be one of the stronger teams on the alliance doesn't mean that we should get the preference for everything. We try and fill in the holes for what other alliance members need. So if we need to do a bunch of L1s and not score L4s or whatever to get that ranking point, we're going to be on that right away. whatever the alliance needs are is what we're prioritizing. That being said, we're also still advocating for our beliefs and what we need to do as well, but within the framework of the alliance.
One example, I just want to give of that really quickly because people know 2025 pretty well. When you're divvying up pieces of the reef to do, a big one that people don't want to do is the back. So that's one of those places where if you're looking to be a team player, maybe that's something where you can say, okay, I know they're not the best, but if you're confident in your ability to do them, even if it maybe makes you a little slower doing those pieces, so someone else doesn't have to. On the contrary, when we were at Mary Ward Day 2 and I had brand new drivers who'd never done a practice match, that's one of those times where you advocate and say, hey, this is the situation. I'm really not comfortable doing it. I would if I could, but I can't this time. And like setting healthy boundaries. But you want to be obviously as flexible as you can. So like playing that line of being a team player while advocating for yourself.
The other thing that we try and do is facilitate conversation between all the teams. So it can be the scenario where, especially if you have like two very strong teams, they kind of go off and like on a tangent, like, oh yeah, we'll do blah, 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 go down the road, but not include like a third team that's maybe not as capable or not as confident. One of our goals or roles in any match is to make sure that all three partners or all four partners in the case of championships are involved in that conversation and advocating for what they think, because they'll have different ideas. Even if your robot isn't performing, you might have great ideas about how to do well in this match. That those two things are not necessarily linked.
Especially at champs where there's a fourth robot that isn't playing.
Yeah.
That's one of the best ways you can keep them included and keep them feeling part of the team is keeping them involved in match planning, review, and discussion.
So yeah, we're trying to make sure that everybody's having a chance to talk and advocate for their things. So we're not trying to drive the conversation so far down the road and leaving the team that maybe isn't as capable. We want to have them involved in every step of the way of the conversation. And obviously, we're trying to maximize their performance at the end of the day. That's our other goal.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
So starting the conversation, now that you've done your due diligence, you've kind of, in our case, we typically think of a preliminary plan that we think makes sense based off the data. That doesn't mean you get to shove it down other people's throats and make them comply. So you want to go in, and my biggest pet peeve when I'm working with people in a match is if they start without someone. Starting without a team creates an inherent power dynamic that gets really hard to overcome. It's insulting to them if you didn't try to get them involved in the first place. Sometimes this happens where they have a match and you can't get them involved. Then you need to bring everyone back together before the match and talk it with them. But the most important thing, in my opinion, is starting like together, because it's really easy, kind of like with the two powerful teams that then leave someone out. You have two teams that like come up with a decision, they're locked in, they're super happy with it, and someone else has another opinion and they don't get to voice it on time. And like if you're the one who's late to the party, maybe you have really good ideas and you didn't get to voice them, and now you're in a plan that you don't really like. It's always harder to redo the plan than do it right in the first place, and it takes up more of your time. And time is a valuable resource at events as well, especially when you're doing, some people are doing multiple roles. Some people who are doing the match planning are also the coach. The less you can redo your match plans, the more time you save and the better foot you're all on. So if you have to, you can, but you have to bring everyone back together to do it. That's like something I very strongly believe in. And then really starting with non-match related conversation to put people off on the right foot. Something like, hey, I noticed you just had a really good last match. Like, that's awesome. Or like getting to introduce each other. Like, how's your event going? My name's Taegen. How long have you been doing FRC? Is this your first like event this year? Or maybe you've known that, and like, how's the first event going for you guys? All of that sets the tone. And because we don't want it to be like a transaction, we want it to be like a group consensus and decision. Vibes are so important. Like you need to have a good attitude and come into the match. Like even if your event's not going great, you can still, each match is a new opportunity. So we want to set it off on the right foot. So my go-to is, how's the event going for you guys so far? How are you feeling? And then go from there. Basically as many questions as you can do as opposed to dictations. So another one is, once we get past that, we have our intros, we get to know each other, all is good. Maybe you know people, because once you're in Ontario, I know many of you in the room, you know me, we've met. I don't have to introduce myself every time, but sometimes you'll have a student who's new to the role, and then we'll go through that again. at champs, you have to basically do it every time. But at least within the province, that's a little bit quicker, and you can kind of scurry through that. But then still, like, what do you want to do? What are your goals for this match? How are you guys feeling about, like, what autos do you want to run? That's another big one, because telling someone, okay, you're going to start in the center, I'm going to be on the right, you're going to be on the left. Well, actually, like, avoiding as many of those like butting head points as possible can be solved by just asking and discussing. And maybe the answer isn't a great one, and then you have to discuss from there. But at least you're listening, like active listening to each other, and going from there. Do not, under any circumstances, skip the questions and tell a team, okay, you should be playing defense this match, or you're gonna take the center auto this match. It's always got to be like framing it in a way that allows them to advocate for themselves, allows them to answer honestly, and then from there you can discuss. All of these are like, you continue these throughout the conversation, but if you start bulldozing in with a plan that you have, not that I have done this before, I've been guilty of it before, and it makes things so much worse. So this is why it's like, we've made these mistakes. Hopefully you don't have to from here. It is so much better to be like, what do you think about playing defense this match, as opposed to you're playing defense this match? Or what do you think about focusing on the RP for this match? The win, if you look at our numbers here, looks pretty unlikely, but by the numbers, we can score the 20 total we need. It's just not going to be enough for their 35 or whatever. Things like that.
Yeah, we never want to we never want to walk into a conversation immediately and kind of demand immediately that, like, hey, this is how we should play.
And if you notice someone doing that, the best way to cool the temperature is to ask them to explain, like, why. Oh, okay. Why do you think that way? I'm not like, can you explain to me why you think that way? And then that kind of lets you bite and jump in and maybe modify from there.
Or like ask the other team too. Like,
oh, what do you think about that?
Interesting. Let's
yeah.
see. And that doesn't mean that we're not advocating for things, because obviously we have opinions on, for example, whether or not we should play for the win or not in a match. But we want to get feedback first before kind of being like, all right, so we think we need to do this, and this is what we need to do. Like, hey, what do you guys think about playing for just RP this match? What are your thoughts? Rather than being like, so I think we should play for RP, so we should just do that. It's just a different way of approaching it.
Like, say Brennan tells me, like, you're playing defense this match, I would be like, how do you feel about that? Like, just want to check in real quick before we go from there.
Yeah, and then that gives them the opportunity to be like, oh, actually, we were hoping that we could try scoring because we just fixed our robot and we think it can score great now. It's like, oh, okay, cool, new information, which is good. Okay, being genuine is also a huge thing that we run into periodically. Don't try and overhype teams to do something that they really don't want to do. We've had situations where people will be like, oh yeah, you're really good at defense. You're so amazing. Oh my goodness, you should really, really do that, when they're trying to convince a team to play defense that they don't want to play defense, right? And in reality, they're not really that good at defense. We just think that that's going to be the best option or whatever. It's not good to lie to teams to try and like trick them into wanting to do something that you think is strategically beneficial.
Like, it's manipulative.
Be honest with them. Be like, hey, you guys aren't scoring that much right now. I know you guys have been working on it. We think that this is the best course of action for this reason, is like, we think you can stop more points with playing a little bit of defense than scoring, and then we won't have as much congestion on our side of the field. Be honest with them. Don't be like, oh yeah, for sure, you guys are like the defense goats. No problem. You're going to lock them down. That happens a lot.
And like, start by example. Be honest about yourselves.
Yes. So that's the other thing too, is like, a lot of the times when we interact with teams that are still developing their performance and stuff, they tend to over dramatize or over exaggerate what they think that they're capable of doing. For example, the locking down defense. Like, yeah, they're gonna score no points. We're so good. We're the best defenders ever. And a lot of that comes from a good place, right? They're trying to advocate for their team. They want to show off. They're like, oh man, we have the opportunity to play with this team. They might pick us later on. We want to have a great impression, and that's a good thing to do. But at least from our perspective, we would much rather have you just be honest about your capabilities. Like, hey, yeah, we've been playing a lot of defense. We're gonna try our best. We're gonna do our thing and whatever. You don't have to be like, oh yeah, we're the best defense robot ever. Just wait.
You can just say, like, I think the best thing for us to do to contribute is to play defense right now.
Yeah. And one of the biggest examples for that in 2023 that I can think of for our specific thing is in our division for Worlds. We had two of the. Well, it was a very stacked division, but the top two teams were clearly 2056 and 254, and they were both teams that were likely to pair up. And we had a match with 254 late in the quals where we had that opportunity to kind of be like impress upon them, like, hey, you know, we're a great team that could be like a third robot for you guys potentially, and that was sort of the range that we were in. But the match prior, we had physical failure on one of our arms that was scoring that it could potentially break. It wasn't technically broken. We didn't have the ability to fix it in time. What we could have done with 254, we could have just been like, well, you know, didn't say anything, and if it broke, we're like, oh, we had no idea. Wow, shocker. But going into the match, we were upfront with them. We're like, hey, you know, just so you know, we have this issue where some of our bolts sheared. Not all of them are sheared. Right now, we're currently functional, but it is possible that we could break during this match, and we don't have a way to fix it in time because of we had to have to disassemble like half the robot to fix it, basically. And I think that that's way more important, even though effectively what we're doing is saying to 254, the team that we want to be with, these guys have reliability issues. Yeah, I don't know if we really want to be with them. It's way better to be like that. And if it didn't end up breaking in that case, in that match, and we had a great match. But if you break and they find out or they know that kind of stuff, that's even worse. You know, it's way better to show like, hey, we're on top of it. We know that this could possibly happen. Just so you know, we can come up with a backup plan or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we did. We basically said, like, we will score until we shear all our bolts holding our arm onto our robot.
Yeah.
But we should probably have a plan for what to do in the match if that happens. And like we can adjust scoring roles, and then the drive coach can be like, okay, we need to go to plan B. And then everyone changes what they're doing.
Yeah.
So it's way better to be honest about the status of your robot too. Like, or if you're having comms issues, that's another one where it's like, if you have comms issues and you don't know why, it is pretty important for us to have that plan B, because if we don't know what's going to cause it, we don't know when it's going to pop up again. Or if you do know what's going to cause it and you know what we can avoid, that also works too. But so that includes like being honest is like your abilities, your status, everything like that.
Yeah. So in terms of a team, if a team came up to me and said something like that, that would be like super impressive from my perspective. Like, hey, we know that like we're having a struggle or whatever. Here's our issue right now. We're being upfront. This is our problem. Maybe we can work together to figure something out.
Yeah, being prepared. And like maybe you can help them. If they came up, like if say I'm playing against team B that has wiring issues, and they're like during the match discussion, they're like, yeah, but we're having some weird like radio power issues right now. I'm like, I can send my elect guy to go help you guys out, and we can get an extra set of hands on the issue to see if we can combat that. If you don't say anything, you don't get a second opinion, you don't get that extra help. Maybe you don't want the help. Totally fine. Like, but there's no harm in like you're effectively a team. You may as well act like it for both the match planning and like you want everyone's robot to be at their best. That's like a fundamental part of FRC. So better to work together. Good. The next part, which is special, is working as an LIMS alliance. So quals, it's typically, 10, 15-minute discussion at most. You're in, you're done. On a LIMS alliance, there are other things to do once you're in it for the long haul. You're effectively married for the day. So you want to work together and get along and treat each other as equals. So the biggest thing that we want to avoid having in our alliances is a weird power dynamic because of who was picked first or who the captain is. You want all teams on the same page, just like you do in quals when you've got two teams who are higher performing and one team who isn't, or one team that's higher performing and two teams that aren't, or all three of you are great, even better. But you want to stay on the same page and treat each other as equals. You want to avoid pulling the I'm the captain, so I'm in charge card at all times if you're the captain. That makes you, like, if I said that to someone, I know they would lose respect for me instantly. If I can't convince you guys that what I'm doing is right with my words and I have to pull that card, I'm doing something wrong in communicating. So you want to stay consensus based as much as you can at all times. Use all your resources and your people. Like I mentioned earlier with championships where you have 4 teams, it's super easy to make the person not on the field feel left out. Whereas really they're a resource. That team has scouts you can use. That team has a drive coach who can be behind the glass. That team can record matches and do match review. That's what we did in 2023. So we ended up not being picked by 254, possibly related to the reliability reasons. Definitely related to the reliability reasons. And we were the 4th robot for the 4th alliance with 111, 1561, and 3663. And we were the 4th robot. We did not touch carpet the whole time. Brennan touched carpet. He acted as an alliance coach and was helping for finding spots that were open on the grid, and was ultimately influential in the one match that we did win because he was able to help communicate and cross the bridge when one robot wasn't able to like do the A plan, go run over to the other team and tell them what was going on. And then I did match review because I had my iPad and I record all the matches and worked through with each captain or with each coach what to do, like what was happening. The other thing that you do as an alliance, especially if you are doing drive review, typically that's something that we will end up doing just because that's something we really care about, and other teams just go along with it. Because I mean, if I'm saying, hey, let's see if we can get more points out of it, no one's going to say like, no, I don't want to watch what you're doing, but it is really important to keep it through the proper channels. So match planning and match strategy, keep it with the person who is actually in charge of the role, and basically never talk to another team's drive team unless you've been given explicit permission to do so. Typically that means like the coach will be like an ambassador for each team, and the coaches will talk to each other or the strat teams will talk to each other. But one of the things that you want to like be successful and keep everyone on the same playing field is not going up to another team's driver or human player to tell them what to do unless you've been given permission by the team's coach. So you should always check with that. Like, hey, if we're doing match review, should I do that with you, or would you be okay with me doing that with your driver? Or, hey, can I talk to your human player really quickly about how to load my robot? But for example, if I have feelings about how a human player is loading my robot, I'm not going to go up to this like high school kid and be like, you did not throw enough coral. You need to pick it up. You are throwing this for the alliance. Look at this video where you're just like, why would you ever do that? That's not going to keep anyone in the right headspace to perform at their best, because it's a mental game as much as it is a physical, like driving your robot game. So you want everyone like in the right channel. So typically coach is your go-to or your strategy mentor, depending on the team. We've had some pretty negative experiences where coaches have gone up to, or strat teams have gone up to our drivers to tell them to do something that I find unethical even. And sometimes I'll overhear it and I'll jump in. Sometimes they'll say to me like, hey, X team mentioned this. And I'm like, oh, no. And then we have a problem. And if you have a problem on your alliance, like no one's happy, right? And then you've got that weird discussion thing. So just keep it to the proper channels. And then that's like a non-issue. And we want as few issues as possible.
Yeah, don't tell our drivers to intentionally break other teams. We're not going to do that.
And then like that's your rep on the line. Like I will forever think of you a little bit less if you tell me to like tell my driver to go break someone else
on purpose.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Fun section. Common points of conflict. So these are the ones that we think pop up a lot, and so want to give you the tools to address them before they become.
How we do it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that our way is the perfect way for sure, but it's how we approach things. Give you a different idea.
We kind of touched on this one a little bit, but demanding teams play defense. It comes up almost every year. Even in 2025, where it was like triple offense ended up being the way to go, teams will feel relegated to defense because it's almost got a stigma about it and associated with being bad. So never demanding it, which we kind of covered earlier, but also like if a team thinks like, oh, well, I don't really want to play defense, like it's not a very glamorous role. Some of the most successful teams out there play it, and that can also be something you mention, like explaining the importance of why you do it and saying, especially in elims, typically like teams who get picked in the last round will be like, oh, well, I'm just going to play defense. But it's not just playing defense. It's a critical part to what you have to do in some cases. And so you do want to explain the importance of it while balancing that line of being genuine and being like, oh, you're the defense goats, you should do it. So being genuine. It's important to advocate for the team to play defense in a respectful way and explaining why you think it will have a bigger net positive impact, like stopping the other alliance from scoring more. It'll help with cohesion for not bumping into each other in the reef. These are all good things that you could use in 2025. They will change for 2026, and they changed in 2024. Sometimes it was like teams didn't want to be relegated to being the feeder robot, but it's like, no, this is actually really important for us to maximize our amplification periods. So playing defense in that way is like, I mean, you can always do conditional plans. That's another point that I mentioned, where it's common in quals when a team says they fix something and they're like, no, we're going to score a lot this match. You can do, like, I like to have conditional plans where it's like, okay, you want to start the match playing a bit of offense, but if it's not happening, 30 seconds in, if you haven't scored 2 game pieces yet, maybe it's better for us to do that. And it's like a compromise that you can make with a conditional plan. Or sometimes you think it would be better for a team to, this was one that we did at Mary Ward, where a team started the match playing defense, but they wanted to score. But we said, okay, start playing D, let us go get all the algae so we can clear off the space, because that way we're dealing with cohesion. I'll call you over once we've cleared the algae, you come back and now you can start scoring. And then that worked better because Waffles could do a full circle around and you weren't jockeying with 2 other robots. You were only playing around 1. And sometimes if it's like a true crossroads, this happens more in quals than a limbs. Sometimes you have to learn when to just let it go and be like, okay, how can we, like, if there's truly no compromise, this is one where sometimes like the team may reluctantly agree to do it and then not play it at all, and then you have no plan. So it's better if a team has decided that they are not going to play defense to plan around that, as opposed to living in this fantasy world where they're going to do this thing that they really don't want to do, and then they're not going to do it, and then you're fighting, like, you're flustered behind the glass, you're cluttered, you don't know what's going on. It's better to do it. Like, sometimes you just have to compromise.
And then both teams obviously have a negative outlook on that, right? Like from our perspective, if we're telling a team to play defense and they really don't want to, and they do it half-heartedly, it's like, well, I mean, they barely tried, And then from their perspective, they're like, oh, Waffles bullied us into playing defense. That was such a miserable thing. We should have just been scoring. Would have been way better. Blah blah blah. And then both of us come away with a bad result. So we'd rather just say, okay, let's make it work. Let's figure out how it works. If we really can't find that compromise, but generally we are able to either convince them or find that compromise situation where, like, okay, you start on defense or you start on offense and you switch halfway through, kind of depending on how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's like there was a toss-up between 2 robots where they're both close on scoring, and the other one's like, sometimes that's one of the things where you can be a team player. If you're close on numbers, I can go play defense for this match then if the concern is congestion. And that's one of those other things you can do to try to keep the peace.
Okay, another really common one is happens normally at the end of calls where teams want to show off their skill set to get picked. And I guess kind of the way that we approach it is that it's a good thing to try and show off, but we don't want to ever do it at the cost of the alliance. So we're always kind of putting the alliance goal as the main priority. And if that doesn't align with the way that we want to be able to show off our robot or our capabilities, then that's unfortunate. But we're going to try and do what we can to have the goal of the alliance filled to the best of our abilities.
You can try to show off your skills within that constraint.
Yeah, basically. So that's like auto positions. Sometimes teams really like, we just got our 4-piece working, our 3-piece working. We really want to run it, but there's 2 other autos that already are better, right? And there's that conflict that can happen where, we really want to show off our auto. We know that it works now, but just it doesn't make sense in the overall match plan. And so we personally never advocate for that kind of thing. And generally, we would recommend teams also try and focus on the alliance first. Now, maybe it's a scenario where like, oh yeah, we're going to win by like 200 points or whatever. So maybe we can try and do something that's like slightly less optimal. We can change that. Match roll is another thing. Like maybe you're the only robot that can score L1 for the Coral RP. And you really need to do that. But man, you know that like L1 isn't going to be that important in playoffs, and you just really want to show how you can score algae. But you know, because you're doing L1, you're not going to have that chance to be able to do the algae and show it off. Well, this is another scenario where our philosophy is just really like put the alliance first and that kind of stuff. Or sometimes you might not play for the win or want to play for the win. You just want to show off, where another team on your alliance might be close to seeding in that top 8. And if they can just get this win of this really hard match, you think, okay, maybe there's no way we're going to win it probably, but this team's like, well, if there's a chance, we want to go for it, kind of thing. It's like, okay, we're gonna play for the win for you guys and try and make that happen.
Another one with this, just as a small note, is like, again, compromise is sometimes an option here. Like maybe it is that you are the L1 goat and you wanted to do algae. Like, is there any way that I can do one just to show that I can? And then like that's something where your teammates who also want the best for you can work together to see if there's a way that you can both be happy with winning the match, but also like, yeah, you can do the first algae out of auto. Like you don't have to start L1s the first second you start scoring.
Yeah.
Like you can compromise, but I mean, if the alliance decides to play for win, don't have your own agenda.
Yeah, there's nothing that kind of sets the tone long term pretty poorly of like worse than like having a team that just doesn't want to work as a team because they're like, no, we got to show off for this match. One of the most iconic things that has ever happened for me in this exact scenario way back in 2011. So there was an end game where there were mini bots that had to race up a pole, but there's only 2 per alliance, and we had 3 robots that all wanted to do the mini bot because it was one of the most important parts of the game. And this team really wanted to show it off. The alliance kind of came to a consensus that no, you guys wouldn't be doing the mini bot. And what they decided to do is instead they went to the other alliance and scored for them in quals and lost the match because of it, because they wanted to show off their robot so much. But, hey guys, we have a mini bot. See, it works. Goes for the other alliance and we lost.
Yeah, and that was what, 15 years ago?
Yeah. I still remember that team, and I know that they did that, and that's just like such a bad look. Now, obviously, that's an extreme example, but there's tons of times where that happens, where we've encountered that, where a team's like, no, I'm not going to do that because we just want to play this, and we know that this is what we need to get picked, and we don't care about your opinions or whatever. It's the last quals match. We're just going to try and show off, basically.
What's crazy is most of the time, too, teams who are doing something because they think they need to do it to get picked, like, I would bet that maybe 25% of the time that is true, but like it's not necessarily always like if you were that good at it, you would probably have been doing it the whole event. So, but people are getting, they're getting concerned
like,
about,
is that one match really going to make the difference in where you want to be picked versus where you are going to get picked? Probably not massive, but you could potentially damage the reputation of your team with other teams on that alliance for years.
The other one that is contentious and can cause conflict is calling in a backup robot in a limbs. So this is something that, as I put in my subtitle, is never a fun conversation to have, but you want to make it as least awkward as possible. Now, there are 2 kind of facets to this, and it is a lot easier to have this conversation when it is a broken robot. Like, a Rio has corrupted, the radio has been driven over and shattered, the wheel has fallen off, something dramatic has happened, the robot is broken. This is doable. Again, you get your proper representative from each team, your coach, your strategy person, whoever, and you check in with the broken team after the match. Thanks. In that case, there are also times where it doesn't make sense to sub in the team, even if they are broken. Sometimes you would like put them on the field, push them over the line, push them into the park zone for 5 points. That would be better. That's somewhat based on who the backup robot is. It is always good as a strategy person just to know who the next available backup robot is at all times. So that's just something to keep in mind. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to sub, and it makes sense to try to fix. Maybe you play a 2v2 at Waterloo in 2024, match 11 or whatever. Both the number 1 and the number 2 alliances played a 2v2 because we didn't sub in robots. I was like, oh shoot, we're definitely gonna lose. It's a 2v3. And then I look and I'm like, wait, they're not playing their third either. What's going on? But sometimes it doesn't make sense to sub, or sometimes you realize too late. But with when the fix is done, when the Rio has been swapped, the radio has been fixed, we just one of our notes, we think it's important before you put them back in to check with all the alliance members and actually verify the robot is fixed. This could be like drop testing it in the pit a little bit, like making sure, okay, was it an encoder issue? Can we run an auto on the stand without, like, with the wheels off the ground, something like that, before you sub them back in. Typically, the goal with a broken robot is to put them back in exchange for the robot who was subbed in the first place. The more awkward conversation to have is when it is an underperforming robot. So it is legal to sub a robot out for any reason. There is like guidelines in the rules that say like it can be like for a mechanical or programming failure, but it's not all encompassing, because like what if it's an electrical failure? What if it's a like compatibility issue? So we verified, and you can do it when a team is having issues or things aren't going to plan. You can, or if it's champs as well, like you can play any of your 4 teams. And we'll do a case study on that in a second. But there it's much more delicate. And so from that, typically what we would recommend is getting the whole alliance together. And normally this happens right after you've lost a match. You go, okay, what do we need to do to advance? Do we need to change the strategy, or do we need to, you can consider more drastic measures. So here you want to walk through all your options as neutrally as possible and verify with data. You don't want to have 2 teams talk to one team and demean them and make them feel bad. You want to walk down the logic with a wide open mind, because maybe you have this feeling and maybe you are wrong. And so it's important to kind of look at it side by side. And it's really important that, like, you have this discussion, you say, okay, this is why we feel this way based on the data, like looking at these 3 teams and then this possible 4th team, this is what's happening. Or maybe it's just like, the trend is in a negative direction. Maybe the drivers need a match off to come back and reset, something like that. And then it's super important that if that team does decide to sub them out, that you give them props for that, because that is a hard call to make. That is something where the strat and coach people will have to explain that to their students. And like, I don't like telling my students bad news, or, coming at it from the right perspective. So it's really important that you keep them as involved in the alliance as possible. Now you're a 4-team alliance and you're playing whoever makes sense in any given moment. That's one of the best parts about the new rules of backup robots, is you can sub in and out. So like, maybe it is true that like a team has been underperforming because their vision is not working, and you didn't realize that, so you subbed them out because they were underperforming, and they went, wait, guys, like our limelight was like upside down. I don't know, something programming. I'm not a programmer, but something like that. You're still a 4-team alliance the whole way through, so you have to act like it and like intro the teams together, do stuff like that, which takes us to 2025 Galileo Alliance 6.
Yeah. So we were on an interesting alliance in Galileo where we found ourselves in a position where we felt like the alliance captain heading into the thing was basically the least performant robot on the alliance. And when you ask, it's really, really hard to have a conversation with an alliance captain that earned their spot through, playing well, getting a good schedule, whatever. They earned that spot and they picked that alliance, to say, hey, we feel like we have the best shot if you guys aren't playing in the matches. And that's a really hard conversation to have. And that was something that we found ourselves in this year at Worlds, where we looked at the numbers, which are up there. It's a little bit hard to read. But
I worked hard to make this as readable as possible. I promise it's as good as it's going to get.
we had to approach it in a careful way. And the other, it's hard to ask a team like that, when, especially at champs. You know, it's your final event, your culminating event. You're a captain at a division. You're wanting to go. You feel good because you've been winning matches. And
In this
stuff.
case, this team was like from China, had made the haul over the ocean. Like,
Yeah,
this was like a team who had put in a ton of work to get to where they were.
Yeah. So maybe we want to
close the door. I got it. Sorry.
So yeah, we had to approach this conversation very delicately, and the way that we did it is
I can't reach.
Oh.
Sorry.
The way that we started this conversation, like we talked about, okay, here are 4 robots.
Like before we even started match strategy, really.
We're not coming into it with like a immediate like, hey, you guys need to sub out, you guys suck, blah blah blah. Like obviously you don't start with that. We walk through every team. We're like, here's the stats of every team. Here's where we're at. Here's the different combos that we can have. And then it happened to be that we didn't have a deep climb, and our alliance captain also didn't have a deep climb. So when we're going to an eliminations match and we only have 1 deep climb potentially on the field, it makes it really hard to win matches because deep climb is just worth so much. And you know, we talk about that. So we're like, all right, so you know, deep climbs, maybe we need to sub out one of the non-deep climb robots so that we're able to get at least 2, you know. And we talked about the different scenarios. Like we were leading that conversation, and we said, you know, like what does it look like if we're subbed out, you know, because we might be the option. You don't want to be like, oh, you're the only option. Now when you look at the numbers and you see the alliance captain is 10.6 game pieces ish, and Waffles is 19.7 ish, so close to double. You know, you see that maybe doesn't make sense, but you're not directly kind of like shaming them for being bad or whatever. It's like, hey, you know, here's our thoughts. We think that, you know, probably the best combination is the 971, 4476, and 9785 combination for these reasons. We have an extra climber. Even 9785 right now is averaging a little bit more game pieces. Why don't we try it for the first match, see how it goes? We want to put our best foot forward and see what happens. And they were like major props to 8214 is like they were willing to, you know, sub themselves out for the first match immediately.
Sometimes the default will be, okay, let's play the first 3 robots, see how the match goes. If we lose, then we'll make a drastic change. But they were willing to do that from the get-go, which was really impressive.
The reason we advocated for that so hard is just because the numbers didn't make sense for anything else at the time.
Yeah, and it wasn't like we were kind of on a knife's edge of like, maybe this is better, maybe this isn't. Let's see how it goes and make a change. It was the other way. Like for us, we had that benefit of having a reasonable points gap to make that discussion, but that's one of those, again, back to compromise. If you had to, maybe you would play the first 3 for the first match, see how it goes, and then sub in for the next one.
And the thing that we said too is like, we're going to reevaluate after every match. Like, let's talk about this every single match and be like, is this working? Is this not? What do we think our best foot forward? Who's performing well? That kind of stuff.
And we lost our first match.
We lost our first match. So it was also really hard on them too, right? Because from their perspective, they subbed themselves out. We didn't have a super good match. We lost our first match, and we're in the lower bracket. It's now or never. And they're like, maybe we should sub ourselves in because we didn't do very well. And, you know, we were able to have that conversation again. It's like, hey, you know, we played pretty badly our first match.
We went over the match footage, and like we had lost by something small, like 10 points. And we're like, look at all of these left points on the table.
We made so many mistakes, and we lost by like 10 points. So we're like, we can do this. It's, you know, it's okay. And then, you know, there's a lot of back and forth, but ultimately they decided to keep themselves out and
then we won, and they're like, okay, we feel better now.
We made the lower bracket run all the way to the finals, and it ended up working out well. But that kind of stuff is really hard, but you want to approach it in a very compassionate way. Remember that you could be that team that needs to sub out potentially for the alliance. So
it was just purely like these numbers that got them.
It was the biggest contributor.
And the lack of climb, like because
yeah, and that was. And I mean, I'm not going to say that there wasn't language barrier concerns. There were not many people on the team that we could talk to quickly to make these discussions.
Yeah.
So that was an added element of like someone was translating back to their coach to kind of fill them in on what was going on. So I don't know what happened in that conversation. But what I know is that this is I presented this in like 2 separate tabs. Basically, I had my iPod out and we were like flipping between the tabs and looking at everything and going from there. And then they were willing and like
And it's
throughout.
also just engaging them too, right? Like,
Yeah, the whole
we're like,
time.
yeah, you guys are still the captain. Like, ultimately, it's still their decision, and we said that too. Like, this is just how we feel, and
Take it or leave it.
yeah.
Basically,
And like when they weren't in it, it's like, don't worry, you're still involved.
the
You got
coach was running around.
like running around calling different posts that we were missing or whatever, counting down and all this stuff. It's like, and hyping them up for that because it was useful information. Like, yeah, thank you for doing that. We would have missed that one, or we would have forgot about that, or the fact that you did that countdown was awesome. Great job. Making the team that's on the sidelines feel a part of things and feel valued is huge for an alliance.
Yes.
How many of your alliance partners had data supporting this?
Both us and 971 had data to support it. And I mean, there was like, it's one of those things where you look and once you're experienced and you've looked at numbers, like you look at it and like in your stomach, you're like, we're gonna have to have this conversation. And like even on the walk back, there was some talk of like, okay, this is like, we should probably approach this before we get into match planning. And it wasn't like we were trying to gang up on them. Do I know if they saw it coming? No, but at least in the conversation, we made it clear. We're like, hey, we want to talk as an alliance and discuss all our options.
Yeah. And that's the way we approached it. And I think that approach worked well compared to like a lot of some of 971 was very like, let's just play normal for the first one. We don't want to deal with this. And then
see how
we
it goes.
Use that as a kind of argument.
Yeah.
All right, 5 minutes.
5 minutes? Well, that's okay, because now this is just the miscellaneous nuggets of knowledge. So when we were doing this and writing up the slide deck, we realized there's some things that didn't warrant a full slide, but are important things to do or not do. I'm going to start with number 1. And in Ontario, when you're in your home region, this doesn't happen most of the time, but it can happen if you leave your region, if you go to an off-season abroad, if you go to championships, saying, I'm from this region, so I know how to play the game better. It is terrible. Please don't rep Ontario like that. There are teams that have said this to me genuinely, like believing it in their heart of hearts.
And I know Ontario teams have said this to non-Ontario teams too. Not us, thankfully, but it's not a good look. Don't do that.
And like, it doesn't convince anybody. It inherently insults their home region and makes you seem like a little bit of a jerk. So even if you believe it, that's an inside thought.
Don't ignore your partners when you're picking. Especially if you're a captain, like try and be as receptive as possible. Try and find a consensus. Don't just be like, well, I'm the captain, so I don't care what you have to say. I disagree, and this is what's happening. Obviously, sometimes there's going to have to be calls where,
like, if there's a clock,
reach that agreement, and you're like, but you want to be as receptive as possible. Like, hey, I respect your opinion. I think at this point we're just going to keep going with our decision.
Especially because like now they will move on, and then you will lose even more options. So that is like, okay, just because you're good does not mean you get to be overbearing or say or do whatever you want. Be humble. Listen to your partners. Work as a team. You may be the highest scoring, like factually, we were the highest piece scoring piece on our alliance. That doesn't mean we get to boss around 971, Electrona, and Cyber Unicorn and tell them that this is what's going to happen. Or like, doesn't automatically mean you get every auto you want. Like, you have to collaborate and work together. You're not immune from having to compromise in any given match just because your robot might be a bit higher octane than the people you're working with.
Yeah, another one that we've run into is sort of along the genuine thing. Don't over dramatize things that you're not good at. We've had things where I won't use the exact example or talk about the exact team, but like last year, a team was opposed to playing defense and they were primarily a scoring robot, which is respectable. But their reasoning for not going to go play defense was along the lines of like, if we go to the other side of the field, our wheels are going to fall off and all bolts are going to come out. And like that can't possibly be the reason that you can't go play defense.
Like we looked at each other because I'm like, did I just hear that.
So
And like we're still talking about today, right? Like those things leave impressions.
like ultimately it's okay if you really don't want to play defense. Just be honest about it. Be like, yeah, man, like we really want to focus on scoring.
And I'm worried
And
about
I'm
damage.
sorry and whatever, but we're just gonna stick to that or whatever. But on top of not being like a team player and kind of like lying basically about why you're gonna not do that, that's just a bad look.
Don't treat other. This is kind of like back to the first one I said, like just because you're good doesn't mean you can be overbearing. Don't treat people like they're stupid. And I know that that sounds obvious, but partially like over dramatizing or making up things that people can do, like, oh, you're the goats at defense, or oh, you should do this auto. You're really good at this auto. And I'm like, I've run this auto once in my life. Like, calm down, please. They pick up on it, and then it leaves a really bad taste in your, like, if you're just flat out lying to a team or treating them like they don't matter, like that just sits so poorly with someone for years, and takes like I know there are teams out there. Like I have said things that I wish I could have unsaid, especially when I was early to the job. The job I say as if I get paid. Like that I know left a poor taste about waffles in another team's mouth, and I know it because they said it on Chief Delphi, and I knew that they were talking about me. Like they didn't say, "Ah, Taegen, she's the worst," but I looked at that. They said something. I'm like, I said that, and that sat so poorly that we like, mistakes were made.
All right, and then
Go from there.
yeah, last one before we wrap up here. Another thing that happens a lot, especially at championships, is like using previous success or previous plans as like proof that they will work right now. Like lots of teams will be like, oh yeah, back when I won this event or this district champs or whatever, we did this strat and it's the best strat ever. We should just do it again. It's the exact same thing, but it's not the exact same thing. It's not the same teams.
Meta has shifted.
Your arguments should not be based on some previous success. You should be arguing based on where we currently are and what makes sense. And yeah, you can use that as an example of like, hey, this strategy worked well for us here, but you don't want to phrase it as like, yeah, well, when we won that event, it was super easy, and we completely destroyed. If you guys just follow and do our strat, we would win no problem. We've had teams talk basically like that. And it's like, well, it's a different scenario here. It's a different week. Teams are better.
Yeah, it's like what you did in week one. Think about it. How much defense was played week one DCM, like week one of districts versus triple offense, which was the predominant strategy at champs.
Yeah.
If I go into my champs quals match and say, well, I won the week one Newmarket district event by playing 2 robots, we didn't score any algae. Trust guys, this will work this time for real at champs. Like, be for real,
Okay, I think that's all our time. So thank you, everybody. If you have any questions, we'd stick around and
you can always reach out too. If you're a student, send a DM to the Waffles Instagram because a bunch of people see that. If you're a mentor, you know how to reach us probably.